So we've talked throughout the day about the importance of branding in terms of building value in your company. Our next talk is going to be about how modern life affects how you build a modern brand with Adam Spriggs, the founder of Nucleus Maximus. After 10 years of CPG experience, Adam founded Nucleus Maximus, a boutique branding and design agency that works exclusively with grocery brands in 2015. Their core expertise and specialties include brand strategy, product positioning, and package design. Adam's work and perspectives have been widely covered by leading trade groups and publications.
4 o'clock. Anybody use a drink? I'm just asking, I'm not buying. We're going to tackle some big topics today around brand building, and I know we've kind of orbited around that a little bit today already with a couple of prior presenters. So I'm going to try and see if I can emphasize some points that maybe weren't talked about in as much depth as I think they could be. But before I get into that, I'll lead off with a little bit of background on Nucleus Maximus agency based out of Boulder, Colorado. We work exclusively with grocery brands, and we study what's working in our industry. I think that's really at the heart of what we do. We peel back the layers of the Harmless Harvest, the Justins, the Evols, the Chameleon Cold Brews, to understand what drives their appeal out in the marketplace. These are brands who have products and stories, not just products, stories behind the brands that earn the attention and the loyalty of a very busy world. And we want to know why. And in doing that, and in studying these brands, we develop this rhythm, almost this instinct to be able to tell what's going to work out in the marketplace and what isn't. A lot of times just on site and in looking at something for the first time. And so we use that perspective to work on big foundational projects with our clients like brand strategy, product positioning, and package design. So that's the 101 on Nucleus Maximus. Now let's get into talking about brand building a little bit. 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I don't think we would have had to have this conversation or this seminar about this concept of brand building. Because if you were a food brand back then, I think you would have been more focused on building factories, getting a bank loan to build more factories, scale production. You'd been more focused on winning with IPs and patents that would protect your processes and your production methods, or buying attention through mass media. How old and dated of a concept does that sound? But that's how you would have won. That's how companies like Kellogg's and Nabisco and General Mills and Campbell's were built. But a lot of that's changed, and I think some of these pieces are obviously still important. But I think the barriers to competition are changing, and what we like to say is that meaning, not money, is the new currency of business. Earning attention out from a very busy world is the new conduit to success for brands. And I want to lean on Marty Neumeier, who you may recognize that quote. We borrowed it from one of my favorite authors, Marty Neumeier. I'm going to lean on him to help explain why this is. So I want to talk about this. Oh, sorry, it's just a quick peek at Nucleus Maximus and our work here in year one. Young company, just about a little over 12 months old. But I want to talk about, more importantly than what we're doing, I want to talk about what's happening out there in the marketplace, this attention problem that we all have in our hands, this ADD society that we live in. And when you think about it, in this book, I don't know if you guys have read the book Zag. Anybody by a show of hands read the book Zag by Marty Neumeier? You guys got to pick up this book. So he talks a lot about what's happening in our society and what you're up against as brands as you go out there and try to compete for sales, and more importantly, before that, attention. And what he says is that our modern lives are defined by clutter, essentially that we're living in an era of the world's most overwhelmed consumer. And he goes on to outline these 3 types of product clutter that we all confront in our daily lives. And I want you to be thinking about these examples when you're thinking about how important and how great whatever it is, this brand or this product that you have that you're taking to market, this is what is waiting for you on the other side, okay? So the first thing he talks about is product clutter. And you think about it, 30 years ago, the average supermarket carried 20,000 products. Today, the average supermarket carries 60,000 products. But on a much more tangible, personal level, you just think about, you walk into the salty snack aisle or the yogurt category or the craft beer category, how many new products are there that weren't there 3, 4, 5 years ago? And that starts to explain a little bit about this overwhelming amount of product that's out there for consumers to deal with and contend with. And then when you think about each one of these products is defined by their features and attributes, right? These functional benefits. You think about all of the call-outs and the claims and the functional benefits that you see on packaging when you go to shelf in, say, like the bar category, right? Or the beverage set at a Whole Foods. All of these different features and attributes that these brands are shouting out about what their products will deliver to you. And beyond that, you have these marketers who are naturally eager to communicate all of the resulting benefits from these features and attributes. And so, which has contributed a lot to the fact of why the amount of advertising and marketing and message clutter that we're exposed to today has doubled since 1965. So, I want to talk about one other form of clutter that Marty Neumeier in his book Zag doesn't talk about, and maybe it's just because it was written just before I think it really started to become a thing, but we call it our own personal clutter, right? And on top of all this noise and the clutter that's being put out there by the marketplace, now we have this new phenomenon, the constant and pervasive pings and texts and emails and calendar invites and social scrolling, right? That you find ourselves doing at home, all of these distractions that keep us from paying attention to our own husbands and wives and kids sometimes when we come home from work, right? And we find ourselves dealing with all of this stuff that's asking for our attention on our technology. Let alone, so if we don't have time for our husbands, our wives, and our kids, and of course we do, but I mean, you think about how this penetrates your life. Think about how much more difficult it has become for brands to penetrate. We talk about brands and meaning and marketing and getting out there and building alliances and having brand ambassadors. But we're not talking about just how difficult it is to earn somebody's attention today when you think about how filled our daily lives are. So what this all means is that we have a society that's become overwhelmed with choice, right? In product details and noise from the marketplace that's far beyond what we're capable of storing in our brains. And in turn, we've become increasingly selective about what we let into our space. And I think you can probably all relate. And we use brands, these short, condensed ideas of what companies stand for, to make sense of all of this clutter that's in front of us, right? There's these kind of shortcuts to organize all of these options in front of us. And they become these super condensed, we use these super condensed attachments and associations of what brands stand for to say, okay, I can handle this. I'm in the cereal aisle, or I'm in the bar category. I got 10 minutes, or 10 minutes in the store, 10 seconds in the category. We don't organize things by all the products that are there and all the features and the attributes that are there. We're organizing it by brands and what they stand for and what they mean. And so the fact is, we're going to ignore, reject, or forget, or dismiss 90% of what we see. 90% of the things that are asking for our attention, we're just not going to store in our minds. And you can think about how this happens in everyday life. I'll give you an analogy outside of the store. Tomorrow, all you guys are going to wake up, and you're going to have 20 companies that have spammed your inbox just like day after day after day, right? And a lot of these companies you even opted in to hear from, to subscribe to. And in a split second, you're going to look at who sent you this email, and you're going to decide whether you want to give them 3 more seconds of your time. I really can't think of a better analogy of what you're up against today as a brand who's going out there and wanting to compete with all these other brands here in the room and all the other brands on the show floor for people's time and attention before we even start to talk about packaging and dollars and sales and all that stuff, right? So The other 10% though, the 10% that we do open, that we make time for, that we remember, that we come to prefer, and that we may even decide maybe we'll share, we'll make time to refer to a friend of ours or talk about in casual conversation. What makes those brands so special? What's the DNA that we can tie amongst those brands? And that's what I want to go through here a little bit, is just to do a little bit of an immersion into these brands to tell us how maybe we might go about earning attention from this marketplace. And so let's look at some. Ben & Jerry's, right? Ben & Jerry's is a brand that matters to a lot of people. It's a brand that a lot of people let into their space or seek out interaction with. And people see it as this cool, kind of culturally connected brand that talks about, or has fun, I guess you could say, has fun with social, political, and pop culture issues. And what it does is it triggers this engagement and exchange because they're issues that people care about. What a brilliant idea for a brand strategy. And then Harmless Harvest. I think of Harmless Harvest as this company that wants to trailblaze what it means to be a responsible and transparent food producer today. Not just this kind of window dressing surface level talk that we get from a lot of brands that you'll see out there on the show floor. They really want to pioneer it because they know that consumers want to have this discussion. And the way that they gear their brand, the way that they aim their brand is actually to make me a more informed consumer, not by pushing their brands and their products. They know that by making me a more informed consumer, I land at their brands and their products. So another great, brilliant vision. Look at Justin's. It gets simpler and simpler and simpler. Justin's was built on a personal name and a personal touch in a category that before Justin's had gotten there was littered with impersonal, corporate, slow, stodgy brands. And it's really as simple as that, you know? This personal touch in a category that really needed some flair, some life to it. And I think that goes a long way in explaining why people are willing to spend $8, $9, $10 for a jar of nut butter. It's not just because the nut butter is, you know, it got this standard or that standard. It's because of the brand behind it. And it's the right brand strategy behind it. And then Noosa, which is a yogurt company in our backyard in Boulder that's blowing up, it gets even simpler than that. I think people just look at it as this fun, quirky Australian yogurt brand. So when you start to look at these brands who earn preference and mind space from the marketplace, what do they all have in common? They all started with a very specific vision of what they wanted their brand to stand for. Something bite-sized and simple that this hurried, manic, chaotic consumer could understand and would make time for. So from our perspective, the modern brand building game plan, if you could design one, it would start with a very clear, specific story or narrative or brand strategy or idea or association, whatever the hell you want to call it, and we call it a lot of different things as marketers. But it's one specific idea that you want people to hold in their heads about you, because that's all we really have the time or the capacity for. Don't complicate it. Don't let too many people get in the room and start throwing around opinions and maybe we could add this layer to it and maybe we could talk about this. No, one thing. Start with one thing, own one thing, and you can build out from there. All right, but you want to get it really isolated, something that consumers can sink their teeth into. Marty Neumeier, what he does is he challenges your brand to come up with an onlyness statement. Okay, so it's this exercise that if you're going to figure out, okay, you'll all walk out of this room and say, all right, yeah, maybe we should figure out this one thing that our brand's going to stand for. He challenges you to do this onlyness statement where basically you're holding your brand positioning accountable to getting to this super exclusive place in consumers' mind, something that literally can't be matched by any other brand. And the reason why is because if it's something that hasn't been promised before, and if it's something that we haven't heard before, what does that mean? Whatever is more rare, we see as more valuable, right? We see as irreplaceable. And I've got news. As great as your products are, and I've had some great products here today, all of your products are and always will be replaceable. But your brand shouldn't be. And so that's why Marty Neumeier holds it to this standard of getting to this place of exclusivity. We're not quite as extreme, okay? In our industry, there tends to be some duplication. And so we start by laying out everything that your brand could stand for, okay? And that's a whiteboard and a couple of smart people in the room and you just absolutely downloading on us, right? And we want to know every detail, from products to brand attributes to your history, your roots, where this whole idea came from, where you get your ingredients from, why you chose to get your ingredients from these people. We're looking for the gems. So we want to know everything that your brand could stand for. And then we use these filters. We use a kind of a series of questions to decide on what your brand should stand for. All right, and so one of the places that we start, the first question we ask is this positioning meaningful? Do we really think that people are going to get involved with or participate in this in some way? Okay, and this is, I think what you see going back to, like a Ben & Jerry's or a Harmless of Harvest approach, is your brand positioning offering some sort of participation aspect to it that builds more connection beyond just consuming a product, right? That builds this extra layer of engagement. But another filter that's useful that we like to ask is, have people heard this too many times before? And this is especially relevant in your industry, in food and beverage and supplements, because we've all heard the same shit before from brands for the most part, right? I mean, we've heard it all before. And it's not any different for consumers out there in the marketplace. And you think about all the mommy startups, right? All these mom brands that have started up, these food brands based off of, some aversion to some diet that their kids had, which is a great story, and maybe it is your story, but you have to think twice about how often people have heard that out in the marketplace, and has it reached the saturation point to where it doesn't resonate anymore. So it's not just about figuring out, well, yeah, I could do this myself. Obviously I started the company. I know what my brand's about. You need somebody in the room who can tell you, who can call bullshit and say, that's not where you want to take this, because even though it's your story, it doesn't mean that people haven't heard it before, and you have to tell it in a much different way. Finally, the other thing here is let's say we have a tie. Sometimes this weeds out about 70-80% of the ideas, and sometimes you get down to 2 ideas for a platform of where this brand could go, and you're going to decide, do we take this path or do we take this path? A lot of times what we like to decide on is based on, well, which one gives us the richest ideas to build off of and build unique brand experiences around? Does it inspire a gush of ideas of how we can bring this to life, not only through experiences, but through design? So these are a couple of just good starting points that if you're kind of doing it on your own, and I kind of anticipate that, some of you guys are starting to think a little bit about, what is my brand positioning? What does my brand stand for? Is it clear? And does it matter? Is it meaningful? These are some of the questions that we ask around our office. All right, so the cool thing is that once you have a vision for your brand, a lot of the other things fall into place. You have this compass that can influence decisions around not only packaging and package design, but package structure, right? And price point, and what type of retailers you might go and sell into, and what type of other companies you might want to do collaborations with, people who share similar ideals and values and missions as your brand. But starting with design, when you know what to stand for, you know what to design, right? And we talked about Ben & Jerry's being this brand with these idealistic values and keeping things positive and natural, and you see that symbolized and represented on their packaging with this kind of environmental landscape and this bright sunny day, and there's nice billowy clouds and warm and inviting fonts. And then you look at Justin's. We talked about Justin's, this brand with this personal touch, and they take it and they keep things very simple and approachable in their design, and they have Justin's signature at the top of every package. This is a visual representation of what this brand stands for. And then you look at a brand like Noosa, right, who wants to nod to their appreciation for farmers and farming values and their Australian roots. So they show this cow on this open range and this landscape, and this cow is greeting you with this kind of cute little talk bubble with "Good day." So it's going, again, directly back to what this brand stands for. And you look at Harmless Harvest and Interact, they had talked about this too. It's such a great, iconic example in our industry of translating brand values into something visual that when people look at it, they instantly get it. These hands caressing this coconut, representing the extra lengths that they go to for this kind of eco-conscious mindset that the brand has. These are all powerful images that symbolize and reinforce what these brands decided to stand for. And the best thing about this is that I can take their logos off of their packaging, and almost everybody in this room or anybody who's ever shopped these categories can tell me who these designs belong to. And so it's not just about designing, you know, what the first idea that comes into mind based off of these associations that might come from your brand positioning. It's really about translating these ideas into unique, custom, iconically built design standards and design systems that are unmistakable, that when people look at it, because you think about how your own experience is when you go to shelf, of all the things you see, you're going to forget 90% of what you see at shelf. Well, how did these brands figure it out to where I can take their logo away or I can take other elements of their packaging away, and we know who these brands are and who they belong to? It takes some time, and it takes familiarity, and it takes exposure, but with design, custom design, you give yourself a lot better chances to arrive in that place like these brands did. All right, so you have this, let's say you have this vision in place for your brand, right? And you know maybe what it means for you in terms of design and where you should be taking it. The thing that I find in having conversations with marketers, with brands in this space, is that people don't really need to know, they don't really need ideas on what to stand for as much as they need new ideas on how to prove it, on how to take a concept, a brand positioning, and make it real to people out there in the world. Because I think the biggest thing between the gap between having this brand vision or brand strategy or brand positioning and making it real, it isn't a deck that your agency gives you and says, this is your brand positioning, yeah, go ahead and follow this. You have to start to live it, you have to start to own it, and you have to start to bring it to life in some ways that meet people out in the world. So we talk about that generally as marketing in our industry, and I don't like to think of it that way, and you can call it that, but I like to think about how would a brand like this, that's positioned this way, like Ben & Jerry's or Harmless Harvest or Justin's, how would it go out and meet people in the world? So I want to use the time that we have left, and I should check on that, by the way. Oh, we're like up at the end, huh? I can take 2 questions? I have 3 minutes left. Okay. How about we reconvene at the bar at 7:30 and we can go through some more of these details, okay? But real quick though, a couple things your brands can do, okay? Alliances, building alliances. These are simple, easy things to do. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but think about brands that are related to your brand in terms of not just brands, but publications and people in the industry and chefs and other authorities that your customers that you want to reach already trust and already allow into their space, and find ways to collaborate them with product collaborations or promotions or getting your products featured together in the same space. Skip that. Swag and ancillary products, no more tote bags, please. The world has enough tote bags. You guys can do better than that. Think about ancillary and swag products that relate back to what your brand positioning is. Harmless Harvest does a great job of that. Go see them at their booth. They can show you. Now we're starting to see things with experiences where people are saying, okay, beyond the immediate product experience and beyond swag and tote bags and cool shades, Pizza Hut is now doing a projector in a pizza box, right? So they're trying to own the whole family entertainment at home experience around pizza by tying in these experiences and these products that relate, and they're free. How about this? Google Innocent Unplugged Festival if you want to look at the new mecca for how brands are creating engaging experiences, and just read through every part of how they're curating this complete brand experience about this very thing that I talked about, how busy and overwhelmed and how stretched thin we are. Here you have a brand saying, leave your phone at home, leave Google at home, unplug, come out, engage with us. We're going to throw a party. We're going to have a great bands. They have a Spotify list. They use infographics and stats of just how busy and stretched we are. So you want to talk about a brand that gets it. check out Innocent Unplugged. And I apologize that I spent so much time up front. And, but Adam at nucleusmaximus.com if you guys want to get into some deeper conversations about this stuff.